Welcome to another exciting episode of the Business of Digital podcast, featuring your hosts, Matt Siltala and Dave Rohr. All right, we're really excited today, guys. I appreciate everyone joining us. We have special guest Jenny Halasz with us. See, I said it right.
You did.
And you know what? For one of those people that has the last name that everybody butchers, I hope that you appreciate that. Anyway, we got Dave in here somewhere. Hey, Dave.
I am here somewhere.
All right. So we really appreciate Jenny stepping up literally last minute for us and joining us on this podcast because if you've been anywhere in our industry, if you haven't been under a rock, you know that everybody is talking about GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. That's right. Anyway.
That's right.
All right. See? And so Dave and I, before you got on and joined us, we were talking a little bit about this, and we both admitted that we know very little about this. And that's why we are so excited to have you on and share with us just your thoughts on it. I know you've already written a couple articles that we're going to drop, and for anyone that hasn't had the opportunity to read them, we're going to let them know where to find them in this podcast episode. But Jenny, first of all, again, thank you for joining us. Maybe give us a little bit about your background, and let's just jump into it.
Great. Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to chat with Matt and Dave. You guys are a blast. My name is Jenny Halasz. My company is JLH Marketing. It's an independent consultancy, and I specialize in SEO and analytics. I first got into this business a really, really long time ago. Been doing it for almost 20 years.
Wow.
And just really love search.
That's awesome.
I first got interested in GDPR because Google sent out those emails that we all got saying that they were going to start deleting our analytics data. And it didn't make any sense. And I thought, well, this is a good question to put on Search Engine Journal because I'm asked the SEO there. And so I did just a very brief post that basically said, here's what GDPR is, here's why it matters, which I'll tell you guys in a minute. And really what you need to do is talk to your attorney about it.
I did see that in one of the articles. I'm like, she's covering herself. Nice.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. And I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night. So I don't have, legal advice for you here. I really do recommend that you talk to your attorney. But what's interesting about this whole thing is that GDPR is very vague. And it's fairly obviously written by people who don't generally do a lot with websites.
Maybe all the kind of people that were questioning Mark Zuckerberg the other day.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So I want to start, since this is your audience is fairly US based, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I want to start by saying we should actually care about this in the US. And I've seen a lot of people say, oh, well, it's EU law, so it doesn't affect me. The bottom line is, if there's any chance for somebody who's a resident of the EU to access your website, then you will be subject to GDPR.
Yeah, that's something I read that I thought was interesting when you mentioned, hey, if someone from the EU you're like, I don't, let's say that I'm a business owner in the US and I only sell to US and this and that. But one of the things I read that, let's say you have someone that comes to your website from the EU and just finds you. I thought that was interesting how that could even be so. Like how can it be? Like it just boggles my mind. Like the first thought that I had was like, F you, but tell me why I shouldn't have that mindset.
Yeah, it's so what's doubly interesting is I was on Dumb SEO Questions this morning, and that Google Hangout Online is primarily UK based, and several of the gentlemen on there were talking about GDPR and how it's going to roll out in the UK. And basically what the general consensus is that nobody really knows how this is going to end up happening. The language in GDPR is so vague in terms of pretty much everything from regulation to definition to enforcement that everybody's just kind of doing the best that they can and hoping that when it comes to May 25th, they're not going to be one of the ones targeted.
Gotcha.
One of the things that I find most interesting is that the PII, or personally identifying information definition, is very broad. Even an IP address can be considered personally identifying information.
Really?
That's interesting. That's crazy.
Even a cookie is considered personally identifying information.
It's basically everything is. Yeah.
Basically everything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So basically what you're saying is and I loved it how you put it in one of the articles. It said something to the effect of not collecting any data, and you're like, well, congratulations or whatever, but you ought to consider hiring a marketer. I thought that was funny. But so
yeah, that article was more about me making fun of it.
Okay, gotcha.
It's got some information in it, but it was more meant to be funny.
But that's my point, though. What you're saying right here is if there's any kind of data at all being collected, whether how small you think it is or insignificant, it affects you.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Exactly. And so there's no real indication as to how they're going to enforce that or at what level they're going to enforce it.
Yeah, it just boggles the mind. I mean, I know that Dave, when we were talking about it before, I know that you had some thoughts on it, but to me, I just don't see how. I mean, again, it sounds silly me saying this, but are there going to be EU police knocking on my door, or am I going to be getting fines, or I don't know. Anyway, it's hard for me to figure out how that's going to happen, or is it just a matter of the information that I'm allowed to have or not have? I don't know.
I mean, I think in reality, we'll see it play out in EU first.
Okay.
They're going to go after the targets in EU before they come after targets in the US. And most international companies are just going compliant across the board.
Yeah, it's probably much easier that way.
But it's really got some interesting implications. Things like, I was talking with Masatake Wasa about this earlier today, and he said, you're supposed to have them tick a box that says, your visitors tick a box that says, you understand that there are cookies being set on this site, and here's how the data is collected and how it's used and how you can request to have it deleted. So those are all the things that you're supposed to do now. But he said, he pointed out rightly that you have to set a cookie after they tick the box to know whether they tick the box or not. And
then this also makes me think of all kinds of other things. What about all your other places besides your website where you do business, or where you, I don't know, is all that lumped into this as well? Or is it just your website with the data that you get from Google?
Yeah, one article I read from a compliance team actually said that you can be held liable for the apps on your employees' phones if the phones use the network and are non-compliant.
That is just...
Yes.
I almost don't even know what to say to that.
I know, right?
Oh.
This is why I've been really frustrated the last couple of days. And Matt, you see me on Facebook. Dave, you probably have too. Seeing people who are saying things like, this doesn't affect me, and saying, you're nuts. This absolutely affects you. You need to pay attention to this.
Just to for those people that have either been saying stuff like that, or that know that they should do something but are completely lost or in the dark? Like, what kind of a path, I mean, besides, speaking to a lawyer or whatever, like, do you have any ideas or resources or any direction that they should go? Or like, what should those people do?
So in the article that I published today, I did link to a site that I think is doing a nice job of explaining what the requirements are and how they impact the U.S. audience, as well as, has some information about where you might start with compliance. But ultimately,
and to all our listeners, we'll have a link to that as well, just so it's easy.
Yeah. The domain is csoonline.com, but we'll drop a direct link into the write-up.
Yeah, it's going to vary so much for every company that it's kind of hard to say for sure what you need to do. A couple of things that I've seen mentioned multiple times by multiple reliable sources. And again, I want to couch this with, this is not my recommendation. I'm simply repeating something that I've heard that makes sense to me, is that you should, one, leave your Google Analytics default at 26 months. Because if you go in there and you change it to never expire, you are taking responsibility.
That's really interesting.
So that's one thing. And then the other thing is you need to make sure that you have a privacy policy and that you update that privacy policy to indicate what data is collected. And she is talking
to all those people that just went and copied and pasted someone else's privacy policy, right?
Exactly. I mean, it needs to be clear enough as to what you're collecting, how you're using it, how it's deleted or how often it's deleted. And then if you want to be totally compliant, you need to indicate how somebody can contact you to have their information deleted. I don't know how the heck that's going to work in reality.
I'm thinking like you're going to have to hire someone that just, is your EU compliant person. No.
Yeah. You almost have to.
Exactly. So actually, in the EU, the GDPR requires that you have somebody who's designated as the chief data protection officer.
So that every little company that has a website in the EU has to have a chief data officer, even if they don't even have a webmaster or someone that knows how to,
They have to have somebody who will have that title. So similar to like, I'm a one-woman show, so I'm the president. I'm also the secretary. I'm also the treasurer.
The cleaner,
So,
well, and
exactly. The accountant. So I'm all things. So I would still be listed as the DPO.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I know that other article you referenced was for fun, but in the same sense, like, with what we were talking about, you are going to have to hire someone, or you are going to have to become that person or figure it out. Or even, I can see a whole lot of people being paid for consulting small businesses all of a sudden.
So one thing I want to clarify is that that's in the GDPR requirement. And that part does appear that it is specific to EU companies.
That's good.
One last thing.
So as a U.S. company, I don't believe that you need to have a DPO, but double check me, triple check me.
It almost sounds like it could fit under, I know that Dwayne Forrester been talking about, and we had a podcast episode on it about the, basically like a chief, what was it, Dave? The name of it. See, I told you it's escaping me.
The chief digital knowledge.
Digital knowledge manager.
Digital knowledge manager. Yeah.
So
that's right. Digital knowledge manager. I remember him saying that at. I think I first heard him say that at State of Search.
First heard it, but I remember him talking about a digital knowledge manager. And as we're talking about all this, I'm thinking at least here in the U.S. or anyone that's listened to him, that's kind of where the kind of the person that I feel would fit in this kind of a role. But anyway, that's interesting. So everybody, they need to act before May. What is it?
25th.
May 25th.
May 25th.
You guys make sure and figure it out, because you're going to forget what's going on May 25th, because isn't that when Solo's released? Sorry.
When what?
The new Star Wars movie.
I think
you're going to be not thinking about it. So think about it before, so you're not worried about it during the movie. But
go, Captain Picard.
Hey, you're going to make your wife mad.
I know. I did that on May 4th, and she's like, "Why do you do that?" I'm like, "Because I like to poke the bears. I like to poke bears."
The thing about this, Jenny, though, and why I appreciate you being on here and talking about it is because even I, and I don't want to say like I wasn't taking it serious, but I just like, okay, well, how does it really, does it really affect me? Does it really, how into this should I really be? And so you actually have put a little bit of a light under my fire to at least get moving a little bit further. And I think if anything, that's going to be good and good for anyone else that might be listening to this, that might be in the same boat as myself. And so I do appreciate you coming on and talking about it. But just in your final thoughts, kind of just wrap it up for us.
I got a quick question. So I got one big question, and because she scared the bejesus out of me when she said, "Do not touch the data retention in Google Analytics." And now that she says it, and Jenny, the reason you're saying that does make sense to me. But the data hoarder that I am, and the fact that especially when using Google Analytics, it disappears. It's not like I can go back into my log files and re-dig through stuff from 5 years ago. With Google Analytics, it's gone forever. And that scares me.
Mm-hmm. So a couple of things about that, and I think this is, again, something that people have gone around making a lot of noise about when they don't really know what's going on, is that what will be removed is PII. So you won't be able to see anything that Google has determined with their very advanced algorithms, by the way, that would lead to you potentially being able to identify an individual. Now, already, when you do custom segments or you slice and dice demographic data, you sometimes get that a data threshold has been applied warning. I use that as, and this is just me, Google hasn't said this, but I think that anything you have that's doing that is probably what's going to end up being subject to deletion by GDPR.
I'll still have, so what you're saying is, and this is my biggest fears, if we do a new site migration and we want to do year over year for the last 3 or 4 years to show that we've been, steadily, PPC's been crushing it, SEO's been crushing it, social, Facebook tanked, whatever we're trying to prove, and we want to go back and grab data, I will be able to get my page view data, my unique page views. I will be able to get goals and conversions and stuff. But if I start looking at the very granular data beyond that, that's what will disappear, not the general higher level stuff. To a point.
Right. I think what you're going to see is there's going to be at some level, some depth of data that will not be there or will only be there in aggregate. Or will only be there with a threshold applied. Because, let's face it, Google is a data manager. They're absolute experts at it. And so if I leave it to them to decide what should be deleted, then I feel fairly confident that that will make me compliant.
How this will impact web hosts as I talk about log files. Like if I have log files from 5 years ago or from 3 years ago, do legally, according to the, not to go off on a tangent on this, but legally, does a company or even a web host have to delete it? I haven't heard any web hosts talking about that.
from what I understand, based on what I've read so far, it would appear that if your web host does not delete the personally identifiable data in those logs, then they would not be compliant, and by extension, you would not be compliant.
Old log files could actually get you in trouble even if you are compliant and everything else. Interesting. I didn't even think about that until just thinking through, my workaround.
Makes me wonder about companies
my
like
workaround to Google Analytics losing that data. Because that would make sense. I mean, because it's there in the file, so I could at any point, or anyone could at any point, you go and snag it. So interesting.
Makes me wonder about like Authority Labs or those type of businesses as well.
I think the biggest problem we're likely to see, and probably the area that EU will have to self-correct on, is defining IP address and cookie as PII. I mean, when you think about it, it's just going to make it incredibly difficult to do any kind of remarketing or retargeting, anything where you have to where you're cookieing somebody and then, or email marketing, like any of that is going to become really, really difficult.
And the fact that you have to set the
GDPR.
cookies so that I don't have that same pop-up every time for you is hilarious. But
right. Yeah, I thought that was so funny when Masa pointed that out. I thought
and Matt, think about this. Whenever I go, and it's funny because not all brewery sites have it, but I may have been doing some research for future travel last night. Surprise. I went to a couple brewery sites.
No, not surprised.
I know. I went to a couple brewery sites. Some of them ask you, if it's in Germany or over in the EU, they ask you if you're 16, and then when they figure out I'm American, they ask if I'm 21. But if I say, yes, I'm 21, or I set a date.
Over there?
What's that?
Wait, you can drink at 16 over there?
Yes.
Sorry, that's not your point of all this. But...
No. But then they set a cookie and I don't get asked again. Or when you go to IKEA.com and it says, what country are you from? And I set US, or I say Sweden, or I say Canada, and then it sets a cookie. They need to ask permission to set a cookie so that so that's interesting.
That's interesting. Super interesting. All right. Well, again, Jenny, we're so grateful for you being on and talking about this. Any final thoughts for us before we wrap this up?
Don't believe anything I just said. Talk to your attorney.
All right.
I'm going to cut that and put it at the very beginning as well.
All right. For Jenny and Dave, I'm Matt with Avalanche Media. And we are grateful that you guys joined us, and we will look forward to hearing you guys, or for you guys to hear us on the next episode. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.